Now we are recording. Welcome everybody to this sixth and last session of the harm reduction for homelessness training. Today we are going to be closing up a bit the cycle with quite of an exciting session, I must say. We are going to be joined today by Peter Sadosi, who's the Executive Director of Rights Reporter Foundation, and also they're having an online platform. If you don't know it, you should check it out, which is Drug Reporter, and they are like publishing a lot around drug use, harm reduction. And Peter is also an expert when it comes to advocacy, methods, tools, and topics. And today, Peter will be sharing some of his experiences, a few methods, and a few tools that you will be able to be implementing in your services. I was hearing the voice. Someone wanted to say something, or is it in between? Okay. So at the end of the session, I will share a few slides with you, having a bit of a look. And also I would like to share with you a couple of ideas of harm reduction and COVID and harm reduction on how such a thing is working or look like. And we will officially close it off. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Peter Sárosi. I'm from Budapest, Hungary. And as Roberto said, I'm leading a small NGO based here in Budapest. It's called the Rights Reporter Foundation. And today I'm going to speak about advocacy for you. And I'm not sure if we still have that function on the Zoom that raise your hand. Do we have it, Roberto? Because if we have that, then please just raise your hand when you would like to interrupt me during the presentation. So if you have any questions, I hope I will see that when I will stream my or share my screen with you. So now I try to share with my presentation. Do you see it? Good. Okay, so today we are speaking about advocacy, and I'm going to speak about some of the, let's say, theoretical background and also some practical tips about advocacy. And this is actually based on our personal experience as an organization working in the field of drug policy advocacy. I don't say that everything I'm going to tell you works everywhere and in every context, but I hope that you will find it useful in applying to your everyday practice as well. I will also speak about media communication as part of advocacy, and how to formulate media messages and how to communicate with the mainstream media. So first, let's define this word advocacy. It has a broader and a narrow definition. So the broad definition is initiating social change. But now we will use it in a context that in a more narrower definition, which means influencing policy decision making. So all kind of activities that influence policy decisions. And first, I would like to talk about what kind of topics we have in the field of drug policy advocacy. So what can advocacy mean in practice? So, for example, advocacy can be used to question existing policies. For example, many organizations advocate for drug law reform, which is, for example, decriminalization or depenalization of drug use. Or in some countries, it can be a legal regulation of drugs, which did not come to Europe yet, or has not come to Europe yet. We can advocate for changing public attitudes. So when the public thinks something about our issues which we don't share with them, and we'd like to change those attitudes and beliefs, then we can do campaigning and advocacy to change that. We can educate the public about drug use and stigma and discrimination. My organization is working a lot on this particular, part, like public education of people. We have a website. Roberto mentioned the Drug Reporter. We are making videos, online videos, and a lot of articles and blogs. So advocacy can also mean that we participate in agenda setting, so setting the agenda for national and urban drug policies and drug strategies. We can also propose alternative policies, for example, alternatives of punitive measures. And here I do not only mean alternatives for people who use drugs, but also for those who are selling drugs, smaller scale drug offenders. So I think that's equally important to promote proportional sanctions and alternatives to coercive measures. We also can advocate, we can also use the word advocacy in the sense that we are creating a public space for dialogue. For example, we can promote the meaningful involvement of civil society into drug policy decision making. We are now, for example, at the European Commission funded project, we are assessing what kind of possibilities NGOs have in individual countries and cities to be involved in drug policy making, and how civil society involvement can be meaningful, because many times we see that NGOs are involved in a way, but that's a kind of box ticking exercise for the decision making, and it doesn't have a really meaningful framework. We can mobilize people for a cause. Harm reduction programs often have conflicts with neighborhoods and local communities. We can use advocacy to change that, and we can mobilize the communities to solve problems. Then advocacy is an important tool to give vulnerable people a voice. So to tell those stories which people never hear, because these people have no access to the mainstream media. We can also make the system itself more transparent and accountable by blogging, filming. For example, my organization goes every year to the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which is a main UN forum on drug policy, every year in Vienna, and we are filming these events and show it to the public what is happening inside, because often people don't have any idea how drug policies are made in the first place. So if I ask you, like, what kind of challenges civil society organizations face when they try to work in advocacy, could you mention some of the challenges? Like, why is it so difficult for NGOs to work in advocacy? Do you have any challenges? Yeah, Christine.
So I just want to get a clear understanding, like why we'd have a difficulty advocating for harm reduction in our community, like through our NGO. So at the moment in Ireland, it's still an offence to have drugs on your body, even if it's for like personal use. And I think that it's older generations will have often kind of looked for this to be criminalized and penalized, as opposed to younger generations maybe having a better understanding of substance misuse and why people start taking drugs and why people are dealing drugs. And I think there's just a bit of, I think we're just trying to catch up with the times. Mm-hmm. But like hearing everyone speak on this forum, mm-hmm. It's been really positive to hear all the progress that's made throughout Europe. Even we're still campaigning for the decriminalization of being in possession of drugs. I just think we're lagging behind a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this. Yeah, Scott, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I suppose part of one of the barriers that comes in terms of advocacy for agencies tends to be sometimes the clash between the NGOs' perspectives of what's needed versus what the funders are willing to provide and what they're necessarily going to hold us accountable for. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a difference where you have to get quite creative in your reporting of the work you do and also the creative in the advocacy you do, that you don't step on funders' toes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, if you look at those points I made here, these are actually answers I found quite often when I ask NGOs why you don't do advocacy. Most of our civil society organizations are service providers, and they don't have time, they don't have staff members, they don't have funding, they don't have the know-how how to do advocacy. There is a hostility or ignorance of the politicians. Many organizations fear of being labeled as a kind of risky or dangerous NGOs. And as you said, it's also fear of losing funding. There is no funding for advocacy, and you can much easier identify funding for services than for advocacy. And I think that often people don't have an understanding of what advocacy is, and they think that it's a kind of, dirty politics. It's like engaging in dirty politics, but I think there is a difference between public policy and public policy making. To be involved in public policy making and involved in politics, which is like, how to gain power. And what we do with advocacy is more like active citizens taking back control over their lives. So I think advocacy should be a very integral and important part of even the work of those NGOs who are primarily service providers, because those services you provide, they may not be sustainable for a long term without doing advocacy. So if we ask what kind of activities comprise advocacy work, we can identify, for example, community organizing, activism or awareness raising campaigns, public education, coalition building, so building a coalition with other like-minded organizations. We can counsel decision makers. We can do social media, mainstream media campaigns. We can do training for like journalists or policemen. We can do strategic litigation. Only a few NGOs engaged in that, but that can be also important. Grassroots lobbying and direct lobbying. So I can talk about those specific activities in my presentation in a detail. And of course, when we look at the NGOs, they have different roles and styles of how they do advocacy. So not all NGOs do the same kind of advocacy. So there are organizations who are more focusing on advising policymakers, and other organizations are more like have a more confrontational tactics. For example, some NGOs are engaged in activism to push public opinion, like this is the Greenpeace style activism. Some NGOs are only focusing on being involved in decision makers and building partnership with them. Some NGOs are focusing on media campaigning, and others on lobbying. So what is the difference between advocacy and lobbying? There is an important difference. So advocacy in general is raising awareness about the impact of policies or about alternative policies in general. So for example, advocacy is when you are telling your member of parliament how a policy affects communities, when you mobilize people on social media to support a cause, when you're meeting a government official, explaining about what alternatives are for current policies. Lobbying is always focusing on a special issue, on a special piece of legislation. So the lobbying has two forms. There is direct lobbying and grassroots lobbying. And direct lobbying is direct communication with the decision maker. So direct lobbying is when you call your MP and ask him to vote for a decriminalization bill. And grassroots lobbying is when you are asking the general public to communicate with the decision maker and put some pressure on the decision maker. So for example, asking people to send an email or call their members of parliament. When you do advocacy, there are certain steps which you should follow. So it's you are designing and developing and implementing advocacy in the same way how you design and develop and implement your other services and interventions. So first you identify the problem that needs to be addressed, then you do some kind of research to gather the necessary information. Then you develop your advocacy plan. So you find the appropriate way to address the problem and the goals and the objectives of your activities. Then you implement this plan, and in the end you evaluate if your advocacy activity was successful or not. And often this last part is missing from advocacy campaigns. So many organizations are engaged in advocacy. They do something, but they don't really have the indicators or any kind of efforts to evaluate if their advocacy was successful or not. And I think that's a part which is really like a challenge sometimes, how you can measure the impact of your advocacy work. Sometimes it is beyond numbers. It is beyond, like if you have a video, it is beyond like how many people watched it or liked it. But if those people watched it who you targeted, if that audience you reached, then it can be effective even without reaching out like hundreds or thousands or even more people. Then when you do advocacy, the first step is that you make your own research. So you see what is the appropriate action, which public body is making a decision. So decision making is also done in a kind of cycle, like first policymakers identify the issue, then they develop some kind of strategies, plans. So that is, they make the decision, then they monitor the implementation of the decision. So there are these three phases: conceptual phase, decision phase, and monitoring phase. And you should see that if your advocacy issue, where is it in this cycle now? What is the body? Who are those key decision makers who are now dealing with your issue? So is it a committee, a chair or members, or ministry official or party leadership? Because if you target the wrong decision maker, then your advocacy is actually in vain. So you should be you should think very strategical in this way, and you should see like where are those windows of opportunities, when you can really incite some kind of change, and it is also good to map those who are the stakeholders in your advocacy issue, like what are those groups who are in support or in favor of your advocacy cause, and who are opposing that. What are their arguments and what are their messages? So before you create your advocacy plan, you should ask these questions. So what is the change I would like to see as a result of my advocacy? What decisions should be made to achieve my goal? Who are those decision makers who have the power to make these decisions? What tools, activities are the most effective to influence them? How can I monitor, evaluate my advocacy? Who are my allies and enemies? And what is the time frame of my advocacy activity? So these questions you should answer before engaging in any kind of advocacy work. And this is how your advocacy, actually, this is not a rocket science to make an advocacy plan. You just need to identify your objective, indicator, allies, targets, activity, and time frame. And what is also very important is that you don't use the same advocacy methods in every scenario and every context. So There are different advocacy methods for different kind of challenges, to meet different kind of challenges. So for example, when you have compatible goals with like-minded organizations, and you think that working together can enhance your chances, then you can try coalition building. So building alliances with other organizations and create a movement. So for example, if you work with women who experienced homelessness and use drugs, then of course you can form a coalition with organizations working with women, people living in homelessness and people who use drugs. Then if you have a target, a decision maker who is open to your advocacy call, then it is the best to use direct lobbying, to go and talk to the decision maker directly, and maybe you prepare some kind of papers and briefing papers to approach the policymaker. But when the policymaker is not decided, and it can be swayed by the public opinion, then you can use mobilization and mass action to influence the policymaker, apply public pressure on the policymaker. So you organize a march, a rally, a petition, an open letter, which will be publicized by the media. And when the policymaker is not accessible, or the goal is, or your goal is to change public attitudes, then you can use media campaigns, mainstream social media to educate the public, and we will speak about those tools which you can use in this case: press release, a press conference, videos, TV interviews, blogs, social media. So now I will tell you some tips about how to use these tools effectively. And another important exercise is to see who are your allies, who are neutrals, and who are your opponents. So I think that's a pretty useful exercise to put them to split all your stakeholders into one of these groups, and to see whether they have a low or high influence in your issue. And what is called a stakeholder analysis is also can be useful before you are planning any kind of advocacy activities. So it's a very simple exercise. There are two axes. One is the interest and the impact of stakeholders. The other one is the power and the influence of stakeholders. And then you place each of your stakeholders into this system, into this matrix. And you can see who are those stakeholders who you really need to target, and especially you should be very targeted when it comes to this group, the manage closely group. So those who have high power and influence, and those who have great interest in your issue. But it doesn't mean that you should not deal with others. So for example, with those who have a low influence, low power, you should keep an eye and monitor them. Those who are friendly to your cause, but they have low influence, you can keep them satisfied. Others you can keep informed. So it is also important who is your target group. And with different kind of target groups, you should use different tools. So I see often, when some organizations make a research, and then they make a research paper, which is usually quite long, and then they just send the research paper to the policymaker, and then usually they don't get any response, and the research paper is buried. So then you should be mindful how you approach your policymaker. Even if you have super good research results, if you don't make that digestible for policymakers, then it will be useless. So if you want to reach out professionals and scientific people, of course it's good to have research papers and scientific papers. If your target group is decision makers, then you should transform your research findings into policy briefings and fact sheets. if you want to reach out media workers, then your tools are interviews and press releases, conferences. If you want to reach out the general public, you need articles, reports, video clips. And of course, there is a difference of which target group values scientific evidence, and the other will value personal stories or anecdotal evidence. So let's see a few tips about direct lobbying. So when you are approaching your policymaker and you want to go and speak to the policymaker, so I think what is really important here is to focus on your message. So to have a very concise and meaningful message to go to approach the policymaker with. You should also consider what resources you want to leave behind. So for example, you prepare a fact sheet, you prepare a flyer or report, which you will leave at the policymaker. And even if you have a very clear message, then you still need to have an ask from the policymaker. And I think that's the most important thing. If you go in a group, you should clarify who is the lead of the speaker. You know, sometimes when you go in a group of NGOs and then they are like interrupting each other and there is no clear communication, then that can be, it's not so effective. Even if you have very good data, scientific reports, something substantiating what you're saying, you still need to share some personal stories or concrete examples to explain why do you care about this issue. So research is useful, but it's not enough in itself. Policymakers can be also bound by personal stories. Of course, when you do direct lobbying, that's not the time to be confrontational. So you can do actions, but direct lobbying is not for confrontation. You should be supportive and assertive, and you should emphasize how the solving of the problem is useful and beneficial for both sides. Avoid professional jargons. You know, policymakers don't understand like PLW, all these abbreviations and jargons and acronyms. So don't use that. It's again, it's a very common mistake I see when people are speaking at policy making forums and people, and then of course be polite and ask him for his time, and even if he's not supportive to your cause, maybe next time he will be. So that's better to build a good relationship. So I told you that when you approach policymakers, it's good to have some kind of background materials with you. We call that backgrounder. So that's a document which is usually no longer than 5 or 6 pages, which gives background information about your issue in a brief, readable, easily digestible format. Of course, policymakers are quite different in how they can process complex information. Probably some of you heard that the difference, for example, between Obama and Trump. So Obama read long reports every morning. Big files were prepared for him, and he read all this. Trump could not process anything beyond simple bullet points and graphics. So that you should know like what kind of policymaker you will speak to. But these kind of fact sheets and backgrounders are pretty good to make your information digestible. Then you can do it in different kind of formats. You can do a fact sheets or a briefing paper or a question and answer sheet. You need to include short introduction, facts and figures, give the sources you use. And I think it is also very useful when you put some powerful quotes in the briefing paper, which puts into context your issue. And in the end of the briefing paper, of course, you give your credentials and contact information in the end. I think these kind of backgrounders are very useful for promotional purpose for your organization as well. You know, when people will search for documents in your case, then they will find your papers. Street actions, when your policymaker is not so approachable or clearly hostile to your cause, then you can think more about more confrontational tactics and more tools which can mobilize the public to change the opinion of the decision makers. Again, if you organize any kind of street actions, we did in the domestic level, local level, and also internationally at the UN. This picture shows one of our protests in front of the UN headquarters in Vienna. So before organizing this kind of public events, you should need to do adequate advertising. So otherwise people will not attend and the media will not attend. So even if you have a very cool event with very good cause, I think if you don't prepare it well, then it is a wasted time and energy. You have to prepare the speeches before, also like technically, like if they will be, if people can hear that. Otherwise you end up with a situation like, the beginning of the Life of Brian movie, when nobody understands what you're speaking about. Then make your event newsworthy. So there are many kind of these events. For journalists, for sure, they attended a lot of events like that. So if you do something unusual, something not traditional, maybe you show something, a visual element which is not usual, it's like unorthodox, then you can attract the attention of journalists. And before organizing actions, of course, you should contact your lawyer or any lawyers about the laws in your particular countries. If you need to report your action to the police, or how is your legislation about that, and of course it is also useful if you make the protesters or the participants themselves that they should feel that they are important, they can take part in some kind of collective action, rather than just being passive audience to your event. That now I will speak a bit about media communication, when you want to use the media for communication for advocacy, and you want to work with the media. I think one key and golden rule before you start to work with any kind of media is that you need to prepare your messages first. That's the first thing. It's not like you call your journalist first or you approach any kind of media outlets. But before you do that, you have to sit down with your team and think about your messages. When I speak about media message, that's a one sentence concise statement that clearly articulates your goals and generates public interest. So if you have this kind of panels, like 3-4 sentences, powerful messages, then you have a much greater chance that you will be effective in media communication. So that's the first step, to at least to have four sentences. Even if you are woken up in the middle of the night, you can say like, what is the main message in my media campaign? It's like much more people try to sell messages than who are writing articles, and this is important to acknowledge. Like in the United States, for example, there are 33,000 full-time journalists, and there are like 300,000 people who are working in like PR and other organizations that try to sell messages. So there is like there is a big competition for the attention of journalists. So you have to compete with your topic. There are maybe for you your cause is the most important in the world, but for the media it is just one from the many. So you have to make your cause more important for them. There are several books and articles about how you can formulate your media message in an effective way. One book I can recommend you is Chip Heath and Dan Heath's book, Made to Stick. And that book is especially about how you can make your media messages powerful, how you can make them stick to people. And they analyze what are the main principles of powerful and effective media messages. And they come up with like 6 main principles. So simplicity, that your message need to be very simple, not a complex one. Unexpectedness, so that you should tell something which is countering people's expectation, like kind of violating people's expectations, something unusual. If a message is concrete, that helps a lot. So you should avoid any kind of abstract ideas and concepts in your media messages. You need to be credible, but credibility in media communication means something else than in science, for example. So something like, what you see in advertisements when it says that try it yourself and you will see that it is effective. So this kind of credibility. Emotions, of course, people need to be touched by your message emotionally, but by the appropriate emotion. So if you do not inside the appropriate emotion, then your message can again fail. And then of course stories. So there are some research findings that show that people memorize stories 22 times more than just simple data. So if you put your data into some kind of story framework, then your message can get through easier. So if you use in your media communication stories, then that's good stories, then that's again one of the cornerstones of your success. So I recommend everyone to work a lot and brainstorm at the team about your media messages if you work with media communication, because that's really like the first most important thing. And in this book, just to that you can easier memorize these 6 principles, it gives up, it sums up the word success: simply, unexpected, concrete, credentialed, emotional, story. So you can memorize that easier. There are different types of media messages, and again, you can think about different kinds of messages to formulate. There is the fact result message. So, for example, I gave you here an example from a green or environmental NGO. Every year we use 90 plastic bags. Most of them end up in the ocean and be decomposed in 1,000 years, poisoning all sea life forms for generations to come. So this is a fact result. There is a fact, and you tell the result of that. If you can formulate a problem solution media message, so that plastic bags cause terrible damage to the oceans and destroy marine life. By restricting access to them, we can save the seas for future generations. So you present the problem and you present the solution in one sentence. Then there are the advocacy and call to action messages, like call your senator today, tell them to vote on the anti-plastic bill. Next time you go to shopping, think about the garbage islands in the ocean, don't buy plastic bags. So these kind of these 3 types of messages are all important when we are communicating in the media. So before you design your media message, you should ask the following questions. What do you want to achieve? So for example, what kind of headline you want to see in the press? What action you would like to see from people, decision makers, that's something you want people feel when they are personally receiving your message. You should also ask, like, what do people know about your issue? So what can be surprising for them? What is that they don't know? And you can challenge their public beliefs with your messages. What does your target audience need? So then you can refer to common values which we can protect. You can make them feel that they are important, their actions are important. These principles are also used by like PR managers when they are making a television ad. So it's not only in our sector, but it's like a general principles. It's important to understand the difference between a slogan and a message. So the slogan is its etymology that it's come from the Scottish word for battle cry. It is a short, powerful phrase about the battle you want to wage right now. And if you want to understand the difference between slogan and message, so slogan would be affordable home for everyone. A message: by investing 1/10 of the military budget to social housing programs, we can provide affordable home to all homeless people in our country. So that's a media message, and the slogan is the short thing. Or free choice for women. It's the slogan. The message is: we must abolish anti-abortion laws because they deprive women from their basic rights to self-determination and endanger their lives. So you need both. You need both slogans and messages when you develop a campaign. A few tips to when you work together with journalists, like professional mainstream media journalists. One important tip is that you should research your media, which is research the media in your own country or in your own city. So you need to know which are those papers, TVs, radio, whatever, which can cover your issues. You should know those journalists who are covering your issue. For example, I worked for a long time in Hungary for Hungarian Civil Liberties Union. I was the head of the drug policy program, so I had to know who are those journalists, let's say 15 journalists in my country, who are especially covering my issue, and I wanted to personally know them, and that can be very useful. It's also important that to work with the media, it should be mutually useful. So yeah, sorry, just checking what. Okay, so Roberto say that I have few time left. Okay, so yeah, let's then I just go through a few more slides in like 5 minutes, and then I finish. Okay, Roberto. Good. Okay, so about the press conference, I think it is important to understand that you only organize a press conference when you have a really breaking important issue. So don't do a press conference when you could present the information in the form of a press release. Otherwise, you can damage the credibility of the organization. What is also important with the press conference is that its success does not depend on how many people attend your press conference, but who are those journalists who attend your press conference. You only invite those who can be really important in covering your issue. This is I also present you how you can write this press release. Actually, my presentation will be, I think, accessible after this after this presentation, so you can check that at home. So this is the main structure of a press release. When you do a press release, the best press release is which is actually very similar to an article, so which the journalist can almost like copy paste to his paper, because most of the journalists, let's be frank, they are lazy people and they like to work less. And the best press release is when you can just copy paste your press release. If you put a few powerful quotes in your press release, that's again, it's very good tactics, because then they will also copy paste those messages. You can control what message you will see. When you give an interview to television, and still, you know, TV is a very important channel to influence people, although it's not as it was before. The golden rule here is to be concise. So the television, when they interview you for like an evening news, they only need a soundbite from you, which is usually very short. So our professionals and activists, the main mistake is that speaking a lot, using a lot of professional jargon, using uncertain language. If you don't focus on your message and you let yourself diverted by the reporter, from your message. So what is really important is be focus on your message, and keep to that message, and divert the conversation back to your message. If you speak about social media, I think with social media, I think the frequency of communication is really important. So I see that often some of the big projects, they do a separate Facebook page for every kind of new project, and then they don't communicate regularly in that. And I think that makes no sense. So if you do Facebook or Twitter or whatever communication, then you need to do it regularly, at least almost a daily basis. Otherwise, it is a wasted time. You have to cultivate your community, your audience on social media like a garden, and then it will yield fruits in the end. It is also important to be very interactive with your community, to learn the timing, and also to share contents from other people, and to have a moderation policy. And finally, online videos can be very useful these days, because now it is very cost effective to do online short videos. You don't need to be trained, or you don't need to be special, you don't need to have special skills for doing videos. My organization is doing video training for activists, and in like 4 days we can teach people on how you can edit and how you can use the camera and all these things. If you have a good cell phone, you can actually do quite good images now. You don't need to even to have a camera, and you can live stream your own events. You can use a lot of kind of free softwares available for editing. So I think that's now a kind of must for NGOs to do video advocacy. Sorry, I have to rush with the final part of my presentation. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, of course, and this presentation will be available. And later, if you want to ask me any specific questions about any specific part, then I'm happy to answer you. Okay, and I stop sharing.
Maybe actually what we could do, Peter, if that feels okay with you, if there is, because we are going to go into breakout rooms, if anybody has any question at the moment before we move into something else, something that is unclear, or someone has some comment, maybe we could do it right now, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I can still show the last slide. So in the breakout sessions, you will be able to speak about, what are the major advocacy goals you have with your organizations, and you can discuss what are the main barriers for advocacy and how could you overcome them, and what advocacy methods you have tried, which worked and which did not work, and any kind of successful examples of advocacy for your own organization. So you can, in the breakout rooms, you can share your own experiences with advocacy, but I'm also happy to answer any questions or comments you have now. Or if you have any good